Easter words from Jesus, foolish people. And the same words are used by Moses at the end of his life, foolish people. I think Jesus and Moses know us better than we know ourselves. When you've been through what Moses had gone through up to this stage of his life, when you have been through what Jesus has gone through to Calvary, then surely you have a right to rage at the ones that you thought you could rely on. Moses and Jesus have each had their Gethsemane moments, moments when doubt creeps in, when the future's bleak, when we're tempted to quit faith altogether, moments when we honestly cannot see the way ahead and every road reads dead end. I've been there. Perhaps this morning this describes where you are on faith's journey. Perhaps this morning you feel your faith is weak and the road ahead is far from clear. That's why we gather together for worship week by week by week. In the early days of my time working in Uganda, the security situation was truly terrible. There was a lot of shooting and fighting each evening. And one part of the country called West Nile, up near Sudan, we called it Wild West Nile. It was very insecure, and I had some staff working there. And two of them were caught up, many of them were caught up, but two in particular were caught up in a very serious traumatic incident, and they came down to Kampala, and I said, well, if you wish to quit now, it's okay. If you want to go home now, it's okay. We're working with the Experiment in International Living out of Brattleboro, Vermont. But I said, I'll tell you what, I'll give you 1 week to go down to the coast, to Mombasa, and spend a week there, just relax at the coast, and then you can decide. So they did. They went down to the coast, they came back again, and they said, we're going back to West Nile, to the Wild West Nile. And they went back to work and they completed their contract. They needed time out, and I believe the worship this morning for you and for me is having time out. It's a gift. It's a gift. It's time out. It's a time to reflect on who we are and where we're going. So it's Easter Day, and Cleopas and his friend, the two disciples, are discussing all that has happened. And ironically, they tell Jesus the Easter story, the whole story. They tell Jesus the whole story right the way through to the women having the vision of angels. And Jesus says to them, foolish men, foolish people. The word also means inconsiderate. He goes on to say how slow of heart they are. You see, Jesus is hurt that he is not recognized. He is hurt that all his ministry leading up to this ends in not being recognized. Hurt in the way that you and I can be hurt. Sometimes it takes a jolt like this, these jolting words, to bring us to our senses, to help us to see more clearly, help us realize what's really important in our lives and what is less important in our lives. And as during his ministry, when Jesus uses harsh words, he then patiently explains what he means. Beginning with Moses and all the prophets, he begins to interpret Scripture to them, leading up to the Messiah. Each of you has a tremendous faith history. Scriptures read together, sermons preached, words of kindness spoken to you, stories shared together. Draw deeply on your faith history. Jesus is telling these two disciples to draw deep on their faith history. And he points them to Moses. Deuteronomy 32 and verse 6. Moses is over 100 years old. He knows he will not be the one to enter the promised land. Joshua will do that. And he turns to his people, his stubborn, difficult, and at times faithless people, and he tells them that they're foolish. He reminds them that they're foolish. he explains that God's faithful people need to be better if they're to cross the Jordan and enter the promised land. Moses' Gethsemane began with a high and ended with a low. He was so close to God, his face was shining as he brought the 10 Commandments down from the mountaintop. This was to be their future. These were the commandments that would cement them together. Face aglow, a spring in his step, and hope in his heart, Moses came down from the mountain. Exodus chapter 32. And what does he find? He finds them worshipping gold. Not just gold, but a graven image of a calf made from the gold. At the end of Wall Street in New York was a raging bull statue. And truth be told, we're sometimes tempted to worship that as well, especially in a bull market. The children of Israel are bowing down and already breaking the second commandment, no graven images. And Moses loses it. Moses loses it. He smashes the tablets to the ground, he crushes the golden calf into powder, mixes it with water, and forces his people to drink it. Eat your greed, he says. Eat your idolatry, he says. In that moment, Moses reaches the end of his rope. This is Moses' Gethsemane. And yet, even in that moment, he dusts himself down. He asks for God's forgiveness for his sinful people, and he moves forward towards the River Jordan and leads them to the very verge of the promised land. For Jesus, of course, the garden is Gethsemane. Such was the agony of his prayer at that time that the gospel writers tell us that his sweat appeared like drops of blood. His agony was that he asks God the Father, if this broken and sinful world, if this world full of greed and rapacious violence can be redeemed, can be healed, can be forgiven without the cross. And God says no. And God says no. And so in obedience to God's will, Jesus goes to the cross and dies on the cross, is crucified for each of us and our salvation. You see, Moses' harsh words and Jesus' harsh words come out of a loving obedience to the Father. The words foolish people are spoken with exasperation, but also with love. I know your hearts are closed, I know your eyes are closed, but it doesn't have to be like this. It doesn't have to be like this. The missionary Dr. Albert Schweitzer in West Africa, he struggled to understand the meaning of the historical Jesus. Who really was Jesus in history? And he wrote a book called The Quest for the Historical Jesus. And at the end of the book, he writes these words. He comes to us as one unknown as of old by the lakeside. He speaks to us the same words, follow thou me. And as in an ineffable mystery, we understand who he is. As in an ineffable mystery, we understand who he is. Open your eyes, open your hearts. Let your heart burn within you. The words of John Bell in our closing hymn this morning reflect the same sentiment as Schweitzer. Will you love the you hide if I but call your name? Will you quell the fear inside and never be the same? Will you use the faith you found to reshape the world around? Through my sight and touch and sound in you, and you in me. Sure, we are foolish people. Sure, we live in a world that seems very foolish at times. but it is God's world, and he claims it for his own, claims us for his own, claims you for his own. And as Moses dusted himself down and led his people to the Jordan, as Jesus left Gethsemane for the cross and for Easter morning, you too can start again. Open your eyes, open your hearts, open your lives to the risen Lord.